I'm gonna share the Mishnah. I'm gonna read it. Generally, I'm happy for you guys to read it, but because I know it well, I have to put emphasis on certain parts of it. So otherwise, I'm very chilled for you guys to read it. Believe me. Just give me 1 second, and then I'll discuss it. All questions will be afterwards. Otherwise, we're not going to cover any ground. So, uh, basically, the next two Mishnahs discuss cases in which the reciprocal penalty is in effect, but applying it presents a problem. The difficulty is how to assess the damage which the accused would have suffered had the testimony of the Zumamim been allowed to stand. So what we are saying is here, this is not a case of Makkos where we cannot apply the reciprocal penalty at all. It's more a case of financial, monetary assessment, and there are various factors that come into play. One of the biggest factors that come into play in both these Mishnahs are timelines and affecting the value. So we start off with a Mishnah saying, witnesses say, we testify about this man that he has divorced his wife, and it is known that he did not pay her the ketubah. Now, one of the things I did want to mention to you guys is that how do we can't obviously Tosfos brings this up as an issue, is they can't say he did not pay her the ketubah. They weren't with him 24/7. The very fact that he's denying having divorced his wife is the fact that he didn't pay the ketubah. Because if he says, I'm not divorced, then obviously he didn't pay the ketubah. That's what Tosfot actually means. It's not as if they're testifying that they were witness to him not paying the ketubah. Because also the problem is you would have to then, in any case that you have against the defendant, the witnesses would have to state what the offense is and the time and date of the offense and the place that it took place. So the only thing they could say, the witnesses, the Adam Zumamim, is they witnessed the husband issuing a get to the wife, a divorce bill to the wife, and it was at this date, this time, at this place. And then a second set of witnesses said you couldn't have seen that take place, whether it was verbal or written, because you were with us in a different location. So the testimony of these witnesses results in a monetary loss for the husband, if it obviously sticks. But the thing of it is it doesn't, because these witnesses were then found to be Zomimim and are therefore required to pay the husband the value of the ketubah, since this is what we have found he would have lost as a consequence of their false testimony. Now, one other thing to bear in mind is you could say that these Adam Zomimim deserve to lose their wives because they're saying that this person is divorced when he's not. So what's the reciprocal penalty technically? A monetary payment and forcing them to divorce their wives. But as we learned, anything that has an impact on a wife or children is not implemented. So a Cohen isn't stripped of his status, but merely gets lashed when he accuses another Cohen's father of cohabiting or marrying a divorcee, because his children would be affected and lose their Kohanic status. So in this particular case, the wife hasn't done anything wrong of the Eid Zomim or the Adam Zomim. Neither of the wives have done anything wrong. So therefore, we don't force them to get divorce, even though this is what they would have caused this gentleman, as well as losing the ketubah. The only thing we can make them have a consequence of their false testimony is to pay what they would have cost the husband. So determining this, however, presents a problem. What's the problem? But may he not either today or tomorrow have to pay her ketubah anyway by divorcing her or dying? So what it means of it is that if he doesn't divorce her, he doesn't pay the ketubah. Okay? If she dies before him, he doesn't pay the ketubah. So therefore, we're not sure if there's any payment due. So we can't consider the loss of the entire value of the ketubah. Rather, we evaluate how much a person would be willing to pay now on speculation for the rights to her ketubah, on the chance that she would be widowed or divorced, which would entitle her to the ketubah. But if she should die before her husband will inherit her and avoid paying the ketubah as well as inherit her property. Since there's a significant element of risk in this, the ketubah is sold at a deep discount, at a steep discount of its face value. This determines the ketubah's value now and what the Zumimim witnesses pay as their penalty, as the Gemara will elaborate. So there should be a few questions now, and one of those questions, I'm just having to go through this as fast as possible. I don't want this to drag on 3 shiurim. I give the credit here to Rav Simcha Steinhauer, and I learned his Tosfot on this and various other commentaries very carefully. So the first thing is, since the Eidim Zomimim were quite happy to cost the husband at the present rate of what he would owe, should the accusation have been successful, why should the Eidim Zomimim be discounted in what they pay to the husband? Because he would have had to have paid seemingly the full amount had it been today. Why? We could say there is a chance he wouldn't have had to pay anything if she died before him. Okay? In other words, his estate wouldn't have had to have paid her, or he wouldn't have had to have paid, or through divorce. There is a possibility. But now, today, guys, is he married to her? Yes or no? Yes. So therefore, he would owe her, it would seem, the full amount of money. And therefore, why are we giving discounts to Eidim Zomimim when they were seeking to get him divorced and seek him to cost him the first value? So that's the question I asked Rav Simcha Steinhauer. Now, I don't see Gavin on the shiur. Hopefully he's there, and he's just not visually there. Gavin?
David, I'm just cooking something. Sorry, I didn't come back. I'm starving, but I'm listening to every word.
Okay, I watch all of you guys like a hawk.
Yeah, he's hiding behind a wall, Gavin, Damon.
Okay, so
I'm behind. I'm by the eastern wall. You can't see the eastern wall.
Okay. All right. So that's the first question that you should be thinking about, is why they allowed any mercy of a discount. We said why they weren't forced to get divorced. It wasn't their wives' fault. So they're not made to feel the repercussion of that. But why shouldn't they make the full payment? Because today, the husband's not dead, nor is he divorced his wife, and he would have seemingly, and I use this word on purpose, had to have paid the full sum of the ketubah. So why are there discounted considerations? So that is one of the things that we've got to deal with now. So I'm going to explain to you how this thing works and why there would be discounted amounts. Okay. Now, we get straight in the Gemara, and although the Mishna stated that the conspiring witnesses pay the current market value of the ketubah, a ketubah, guys, would have 2 market values. Now, listen carefully. What are the 2 market values? One for the husband's rights and another for the wife. What do you mean? A wife can sell her rights. In other words, say her ketubah is worth 100,000 zuz. She can sell it at a discounted rate in case she's divorced or widowed. And then the person that's bought it will get that particular document, so he can sue the husband or the husband's estate and get her right, but he would buy it on a discounted rate, because if he had to purchase it from her, he would receive nothing if she should die before her husband or remain married. Okay. So that's the first thing that you've got to bear in mind. So she's got an option to say it's like selling a stock bond. So these stocks in Apple shares are worth $100,000. And if you sell them now, they're not going to accrue any value. And we don't know what the stock's going to be, but we know Apple shares are increasing in value, or Halliburton of Coca-Cola, or Warren Buffett shares, etc. But now she's prepared to sell it at a discounted rate. But we don't know what those shares will be worth in the future. That's one of the things that are taken into consideration. So in other words, the prospective buyer that's purchasing it, if she gets divorced or the husband dies first, he can cash in. And if she should die first, he will receive nothing. Now, you might say, well, why would a person take such a risk? Well, firstly, if you've known the couple in your community and all they ever do at Kiddush and at Shul, and when you go past their houses, scream at each other, there's a probability that you'll earn a good living, even if you buy it at a discounted rate, because there's only a certain amount somebody can tolerate in a bad marriage. So then you've got a high probability. If they get along very well, it's very difficult. You might look at the husband and say he's been a very ill fellow for many years. He suffered from cancer, heart attacks, and a myriad of other things, and he will die before her, and then his estate will have to pay her the amount of money. So as a prospective risk analysis, you would look at the state of the marriage and the state of his health and determine if it's worth buying at a discounted rate. You never know. You could have a case, lahavdil, like Hugh Hefner, who died very late, and he married all these bunny girls or whatever from Playboy that were in their 20s and 30s. He outlived them all. But that's a rare case. So you never know. That's one of the you see, this is why I can't ever be sent to Rabbi Cohen. I don't know what he would say to that about Hugh Hefner and the Playboy bunnies as a marshal. Okay, so that's one example. The other example is the husband can sell his share. So why would he do that? Well, guys, will figure out why she wants to do it and why he wants to do it. What's the reason that she would want to do it? She figures, listen, I might not want to be married to this guy for another 20, 30 years. It hasn't been a picnic now. I don't want to wait for 100,000 to come in. He's in perfect health. And basically, he'll never grant me a divorce and he'll wear me out and I'll probably die before him and earn nothing. And therefore, rather let me earn $30,000 now than $100,000 in 20 years' time. So in many cases, it would pay her to sell her ketubah. Okay? Now, what reason would he want to sell the ketubah? Because he's also got his reasons. Before we discuss the reason, I want to explain to you what the ketubah actually consists of. The ketubah, for those that are listening, is a marriage contract, and it refers to the sum total of the husband's financial obligations to his wife in case the marriage should dissolve through death or divorce. So the primary ketubah includes a basic 200 zuz payment providing she is a virgin. If she's not a virgin, and we're not saying by that case she is a woman of ill repute, she might have been married before, there might be other reasons, it's only 100 zuz payment. So that's the basic primary ketubah. There's also additions to this obligation that are voluntary, assumed by the husband, which is tosefet ketubah. So these are extra payments. The more in love with her she is and the prettier she is, the more he's going to, as a method of affection, add more than the basic 200 zuz, especially if she's extremely pretty, you know. Then there's a dowry aspect that he has to pay for her to the father, etc. Now, all of these latter assets are known as tzon basel property. So what's a tzon basel property? It means, Kevin explained this last time in Bava Kama, it means iron sheep property. So what is iron sheep? It basically means that it takes the name from the fact that the value of the property is assessed exactly at the time of marriage, and that value is entered into the ketubah. So whatever the land is worth, this is worth, that's worth, and it's put as an additional fixed obligation. So whatever that amount comes to the 200 zuz plus extra voluntary money plus the dowry is like sheep of iron, meaning that it doesn't, it's not subject to any price fluctuation whatsoever. In other words, if he's got a gambling problem, it's not her problem. He has to come up with that money. If there's a price fluctuation and he invests in sheep and they end up getting, or cows and they get mad cow disease and their teeth fall out, it's not her problem. Okay? If there is various losses in the marketplace, it's not a problem. So the question that most often comes up in this particular thing is, well, what about inflation? She's losing money because after 20 years, what about inflation? So sadly, guys, I watched a BBC documentary, and in the Middle Ages, I don't know if you know this, for 400 years there was no inflation. What you bought things for didn't fluctuate for 400 years. It's a new con by governments and economies to make us damaged. This has never occurred in history where you were younger, you would pay 1 rand 80 per liter for petrol, and now you are paying like 20 times the amount you did when you grew up, where food is prohibitive. Peas were 6 cents a can. So inflation wasn't a factor that was under consideration there. So don't worry that the wife wasn't ending up getting her values worth after 20 years. Inflation is sadly a new occurrence. Gav, you bouncing in and out. You're giving me a bit of a headache. Are you there, bud? I'm sorry,
Sorry,
mate.
I'm just yeah, I just got up. I had to sit down. Sorry, I can't help it.
Sorry, but it's just difficult when you're bouncing up and down, please.
I wasn't bouncing up and down. I was just trying to get into my chair. Sorry, yeah.
No,
It's
no,
old
no.
age. Yeah.
You've got magic trick. You're like Voldemort. You're there and then you're not. All right, so let's get back into it. So what we are saying is the wife won't lose on inflation at all. It didn't exist then. Now, there's something called Malog property. Malog property is usufructuary property, which means the wife can come into the property, into the marriage with her own property. It never belongs to the husband. But whilst they are married, he may use the property. And he may also, by the way, when he uses that property, he may also make money off the property, so he can grow orchards and various other things. But the usufruct means that the property remains hers, but he can derive the fruits or the benefits that that property yields agriculturally, etc. Or for rental. He can keep that during the marriage only. Now that, by the way, is not recorded in the public title deeds, Hermelog property, and therefore, since the Adim Zomamim do not have privy to that in the deeds office, they do not have to pay should they cost the husband that particular sum, because it's not a matter of public record. Okay, let's go to the next part quickly. So why would the husband want to sell his ketubah? Well, he says when he gets married that he owes his wife like, let's just say 400 zuz in total. Okay, 200 zuz because she's a virgin, 100 and 20 zuz a dowry, and maybe 80 zuz additional. Okay, now he's got a lot of money hanging over his head, and what you had learned in Kasubas is he has to set aside preferably a tract of land to show he's got that asset now. The problem with it is, in the meantime, he's not earning any money for 20 or 30 years. So he doesn't want to tie up his asset. So why would he sell it to an interested party? Because he could say to the interested party, look, this land is worth 400 zuz, for example. I'll sell it to you for 200 zuz, but there is a risk that if I divorce my wife, or I die before my wife, then in that particular case, that property she can claim. But in the meantime, if you look at my health records, they're pretty good, and you can see that my wife and I get along very well. She's got a nice, quiet personality, and she's like a deaf mute and very hot, very pretty. So I'm not getting divorced in a hurry. And then he'd say, cha-ching, it's worthwhile, because for half the value, your house good, and you don't look like you're getting divorced. You got a good deal, and therefore I'll buy it, because it's unlikely that she can come to claim. So therefore, you're getting 200 zuz up front And you'll worry about it when the drama occurs. But now you can do something. Otherwise, you would have your money tied up. So that's one particular aspect of why he would consider if he was cash flow short. The question that you might ask yourself is, why would the wife's property be taken into consideration? Okay? Because what do the Eidim Zomimim want to take? The wife's ketubah or what the husband would pay the wife? What the husband would pay the wife, not what the wife could get for a ketubah, because their case was against the husband. So what would be that particular claim that it would have anything to do with the wife? Okay, and the answer that Tosfot gives is that maybe the husband doesn't want to lose 50% of the value of his property. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he would rather keep it and keep the asset, and he knows that if it all goes ka-ching, he's not going to land up in jail for not paying the ketubah if he lives and gets divorced. And in the meantime, he could spend the next 20 years growing produce on that land and earning enough revenue to have paid the land to pay for itself. So what he might do is he might go to his wife and say, look, at the end of the day, by the way, guys, you must know that the husband's value of the ketubah and the wife's value of the ketubah are very different things. The wife gets less if she sells the ketubah on the market than the husband. What's the reason? Is because, picture this, the person that's prospecting and buying the wife's ketubah has a much more difficult job ahead of him. Why? Because he's just got a document to say she sold him the rights to a ketubah. Now, he's still got to go and try and sue the husband and get the money in the case of a divorce, okay? Not easy. It costs money for a court case and it takes time. Number two, it could be that the husband dies. Just wait, Lance. This is not the time for questions for anybody. Number two, the reason that he's in a invidious position is that if he is suing the heirs and he dies, again, there's a court case, time and money. So he has to go through a hell of a rigmarole in order that this prospective buyer buys her ketubah. So if the ketubah is worth, just say 100 zuz, I'm just rounding it off on purpose. And even Rav Simcha rounded it off. It's worth obviously more than that. We already discussed the virgin gets 200 zuz. There's the dowry and there's the additional payments, etc. We're using the term of 100 zuz because Simcha Steinhauer did, because it allows us to understand percentages better. So just know that you times it by 4 or whatever. Do you get what I'm saying? So in other words, say she sells it for 30 zuz. So why would she sell it for 30 zuz? Because the guy's going to say, look, I'm prepared. I'm going to have to now sue everybody, whether it's your husband's estate or your husband, to get the money. And it's going to cost a lot of time and money. And there's a high percentage of chance that you might stay married or not, and you might predecease your husband, in which case I've lost 30%. I'm not prepared to lose more. The husband is able to get more in the market value for the property because let's see what that buyer is gaining. That buyer is gaining proper property, okay? Now, possession is 9/10 of the law. If the husband sells the property to this prospective buyer, he could say he wants 40 or 50%. Why? Why? Because she's got to actually attach the property away from him. He has it. Possession is 9/10 of the law. So it's very difficult to take property away from somebody. If the court says so, yes. But it's not like you trying to seize a car away from somebody as an asset when you do asset finance. You basically own the house. So you can chase a person out the house, but with a car, you've got to find the car. Very difficult. So it's obviously his position is stronger, the prospective buyer of the husband's ketubah. Then also the prospective buyer is able to buy the land and work the land for the next 20 years. And therefore, he can earn revenue in the meantime because he's got a piece of land that he can earn from, not just the document. So do you understand why the husband's position to say less ketubah is worth more than the wife. Not if you understand. Just not, guys. Yes? Okay. All right. So in terms of quickly, I'm going to tell you whose opinion is what, and then there'll be questions. There'll be time for questions. Now, how do we appraise the amount levied against the zomamim? So, firstly, what we are saying here is realistically, is the Eidim zomamim wouldn't have cost the husband. We're just rounding it off. We know it's like 400 zuz, guys. She's a virgin, 200. We're saying 120 for the dowry and maybe 80 for what do you call it, for additional payments or whatever. And she's but we're just rounding it off to 100 to make the maths easier. So why aren't they charged the full amount, the Eidim zomamim? Because very, very likely the husband would say, I'm not waiting 20 years to earn off my property. Let me take a bit of a hit now and use the money now because I'm short of cash. Within a 20-year marriage, most husbands get short of cash at a certain point of time, especially since the wife's equation is what my husband earns is our money, what I earn is my money. That's the way wives work it out, as Arthur taught me once. It's woman's maths, okay? So that's one of the considerations. Now, we could say, do we work it at the wife's value? Because she says, listen, I've got to keep married to this putz for 20 years. I want to earn 30,000 now instead of 100,000 or 300,000 now instead of 1,000,000 in 20 years. Who knows? He might wear me out in 20 years. He might outlive me. I want to cash in now. So we're saying that the Eidim zomamim realistically wouldn't pay the full price because neither party would stick to keeping their ketubah intact because they've got selfish reasons for not doing it. There is one other factor I would like to add into consideration. And this factor, Kevin, where have you gone? Arthur, where have you gone? Arthur? Arthur, I've worked hard here. I put hours in. Okay. All right. So the last factor that you've got to consider is we say, well, what does the wife have to do with any of it? Okay? Because since they were doing a case against the husband, why is it the wife's business what her ketubah is worth? Their case is against the husband, what he owes. So if he sold it at a discounted rate, let's work him in the equation. But what does the wife have to do with it? So the equation is as follows. The husband might turn around to the wife and say, look, at the end of the day, I'm the one that grants the divorce. You don't have a say in it, but you could make my life a living hell just to get the money early. So even though I might have the power, you can wear me down to a shrimp of a man and just give me mental illness. So therefore, I don't want you to have an out in the marriage. So what I'm prepared to do is you stuck with me and let me give you your 300,000 Rand now to sell me your ketubah, okay, instead of me paying 1,000,000 Rand. So you say, is he insane? He's not insane. Let me tell you the reason. Because in 20 years' time, if they get divorced or whenever it is, he has to come up with 1,000,000 Rand. He has saved himself 700,000 Rand by buying her ketubah at a discounted rate from her. Can you see the benefits, why he would do such a thing? Yes or no? Just nod, guys.
Yeah, but why is he? Yes, I'll wait for the questions. Yes.
Okay, so in other words, he at the end of the day, even though he's the one that grants the divorce, she can make his life a living hell. And therefore, if she's entitled to nothing other than an upfront settlement, then at the end of the day, he saved himself 700,000 Rand because he could see the marriage being sticky. And he basically knows she's short of cash. He's not giving her much cash, and it's a chess game. And he said, listen, I know you're not super happy. I'm the one that grants the divorce. I don't mind being miserable. By the way, the husband can get married to somebody else on the side, so his sexual needs are taken care of. He said, I'll ignore your screaming. I don't mind. I'm getting my end sorted out. I've got another wife on the side. I don't need you. You can withhold sex all you want. It doesn't bother me. But at the end of the day, she's going to fatigue financially. So he said, look, I don't want to owe you 1,000,000. I'm happy to pay you 300,000 rand now. Let me off 70% because you're not going to get more than 30% on the marketplace. Anyway, no one's going to buy it because I'm going to hold out and not give you a divorce. So therefore, we can work it maybe on what the wife's position is worth. So let me just finish. We're almost there, and then you can ask questions. So what it says is the Mishna does not make it clear which of these two prices the ketubah determines the witness's penalty pays, and this is debated in the Gemara. By the way, the wife, in order for the Eidim Zomamim have to work, the wife has to agree with the Eidim Zomamim. She just didn't expect them to be caught. So, if the second set of witnesses said to the wife, you weren't in that location at the time, I presume that the amount of the ketubah is split three ways, and she is an Eidim Zomamim herself, and they pay the husband ketubah's value three ways. If the second set of witnesses can only place the first set of witnesses, but not the wife, then they have to pay, and she might lose her ketubah altogether. But one thing's for sure, she's not getting out of this in one piece, promise you. So, especially since the husband afterwards might want to divorce her and might not have to pay her ketubah. So, how do we appraise the amount levied upon the Eidim Zomamim? Rav Chisda says, by the worth of the husband's position, since he would have lost this had the testimony stood up. So what we are saying is, if we had sold the property and with risk involved, and sold a 400,000 zuz property for 200,000 zuz, but his health was good and their marriage seemed good, and the person wanted to take a risk, then they only owe him that 50%, because the rest he got a cash payout. Okay, they only would have owed him what he sought to lose immediately, since he didn't get round to selling it to a third prospective venture capitalist. Okay, so that didn't cost him 100,000. He would have got 50,000 had he sold this risk to a venture capitalist. So they only would have owed him the 50%. So that's according to Rav Chisda. Rav Nassan ben Oshia said, by the worth of the wife's position, meaning whatever the wife could obtain for her rights is what it would have been worked at, which means that they would have had to have just paid, it would seem, on the surface of it, a lower amount, because the wife would get, a higher amount, because they'd only have to pay the difference between what they sought to cost the wife had she sold the ketubah to her husband. So now we don't know which position is. So Rav Papa clarifies and gives a definite ruling. He said, look, we're doing it by the wife's position, but what we are doing is we say, if that, say the ketubah, I'm just using round numbers. We know you times it by 4, realistically. But say the husband gave the wife 30% of her ketubah and saved himself 70%. Then the Eidim Zomamim would now have to pay the 70% because he hadn't got round to selling his wife's ketubah. So they hadn't actually cost him the 400%. What they did is cost him 70%. So they would have to pay the difference of what the full amount is minus the wife's ketubah had he bought it, which means at 70%, they would have to pay the difference because he never got round to it, and he wouldn't have lost 100%. He just would have lost 30% because it made sense for him to get a discounted rate. So that's Rav Papa has the last word. And Rav Papa also said it does not include the wife's malok property, which she's entitled to use during the marriage, because that's not recorded in the title deed. All right, guys, ask me questions. Go for it.
Damon?
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing, this ketubah is not a document that you can trade, okay? So I'll just give you an example. What happened with me was we had the ketubah kept in our safe at home, okay? Someone broke into our house and they physically stole the safe. So the ketubah was stolen. Okay. Now, the rabbis told us later shortly after when I went for a replacement, you can get something called a ketubah durkin, which is basically a replacement ketubah type of thing, which has got a similar status. But without the ketubah, you can't be married. You can't live with your wife. You can't sleep with your wife if you have lost that ketubah.
Excellent
So therefore,
point. Can I answer it? We've got 2 minutes left. It's an excellent point
okay.
Francis raising. Firstly, the rules today and the rules then were different because we don't have a Beis Din or a Sanhedrin, that's number one, that can implement any of these legal documents. So although it's binding, it's very sparse from a legal standpoint. Just so you know, guys, it's halachically binding, but it's not legally. There's not enough detail into legally deal with it, which is why we have a secular title deed, a secular marriage contract, a prenup, anti-nuptial contract. Number two, Lance is 100% correct. So what she does to the prospective buyer is she doesn't sell her actual ketubah. She sells her agreement of a deed of sale, where the actual ketubah remains intact. Exactly as Lance said, it's an annexure to the ketubah. In other words, it's the right of what is contained in the ketubah then in. The marriage contract still keeps the valid marriage, but it's almost a what do you call it? It's a secondary document that you've sold the rights or the benefits of the ketubah, whilst the ketubah is still intact. Lance is 100% correct. 100%.
But is the husband aware of the annexure? That was one of my questions.
Well, the thing of it is, this whole case has given him a heck of a fright. But in terms of whether she sells it to another party, no. He could not be aware. But if it's got her signature and 2 witnesses on, he'll become aware very soon. Very soon. Yeah, it can be done behind his back, and vice versa.
That's what I wanted to know, yeah.
Yeah, and
But
listen,
vice versa, how can he sell a property that's in the ketubah? That's what I don't understand. That was my
of course,
second
he
question.
still has to make good on the ketubah, as Lance says. He's entitled to cash in, but he then has to get the money from other assets.
But he's putting the ketubah at risk because you might never get that money. It
No,
sounds very
but they don't allow it. Then it comes from the heirs. Trust me that the Beis Din would have to have some other assets attached to it. It comes that's mentioned in Kesubos, in Gemara Kesubos, that there has to be contingency plans. It's there.
All right. So you're going to have to offer collateral from another property in order
Correct.
to sell that property. Yeah, okay.
Correct.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lance, excellent question. Excellent. So you forfeiting the benefits upon claiming of the ketubah. It doesn't invalidate the ketubah.